Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Innovations 2021 webinar. My name is Jennifer Marks. I'm the editor-in-chief of Home Textiles today, and our subject today is traceability and sustainability, and we've got a great panel for you. We have April Stewart Kappler, who is U.S. Operations Manager for Better Cotton Initiative, BCI, which has really been gaining a lot of traction in home textiles in the last 2 or 3 years. We've got Dr. Gary Adams, who is the president of the U.S. Trust Protocol, which is a fairly new organization. He's going to tell us what's going on with that. And Marc, Lewkowitz, who is president and CEO of Supima. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hello, Jennifer. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's jump right into it. And Gary, I'm going to start with you because, as I mentioned, the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol is a fairly recent organization. For those who aren't familiar with it, could you explain the mission and the membership a little bit?
Absolutely, and you're right, Jennifer. It is a fairly new organization, and really an organization that we've been in the process of developing for the last couple of years, and now we're rolling it out to the industry, to the brands and retailers. And really, as we looked at the U.S. cotton industry, we decided that the mission of the program was to advance the sustainability of U.S. cotton. We have a great track record of where we've been historically, but we also knew that we needed a program that could drive our continuous improvement. And so that's a key part of the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol, is to drive continuous improvement. As an industry, we established some nationwide goals for key sustainability metrics, and we see the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol as a specific way to try to drive the industry toward those sustainability goals as we continue down that sustainability journey. I would say in terms of membership, it's obviously going to focus on U.S. cotton producers as being members, but also U.S. cotton gins, those merchandising entities that market U.S. cotton. And then we're going to have membership from the mills, manufacturers, and the brands and retailers as well.
And can you tell me a little bit about those goals themselves? I mean, I know that the cotton as an industry has, as you mentioned, for several years been moving toward better efficiency, less water use, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In setting these goals, what considerations were you making? Is this about getting more people involved in it? What's kind of the finer points of this?
That's a good question. And you're right. As we look back historically at the track record of U.S. cotton and what our environmental footprint has looked like, we can go back and look at data back to 1980 and see those advances that we've made. That in fact, we've improved water efficiency over the course of that period of time by about 82%, for example. And so there is that track record of shrinking that environmental footprint. But I think a key for the industry was to look at, okay, this is where we've been. What could we establish as some goals going to the future? And again, looking at metrics such as water efficiency, soil conservation, greenhouse gas emissions, energy efficiency. Those are just some of the metrics that we're looking at, and establishing targets for those metrics. And those came out of collaboration with scientists within the U.S. cotton industry, also within cotton scientists in university extension, about what would be some aspirational goals for trying to say by the year 2025, we would like to shrink our environmental footprint by a certain amount in each of these goals. For example, in greenhouse gas emissions, the target is to reduce that by another 39%. So that's, and there's more information on our website at trustuscotton.org in terms of those goals, but that gives you a little bit more background of what we're trying to accomplish.
And Marc, Supima is a member of the, I think member is the right word, of the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol, correct?
Yep.
What's
correct.
your involvement there?
In a couple of ways. The Cotton Trust Protocol directly engages the grower community to become participants in a platform that enables the collection of broad-based data to really quantify and specify what US cotton growers are doing relative to their farming practices. And then that data then can demonstrate exactly what the US industry says with regards to the sustainability practices, the reduction of the carbon greenhouse gases, the impact on the environment and everything else. So the quantification of that data is something that is really now possible to do based on technology that's being implemented on the farm level. So we have a distinct advantage to be able to do that. So working with the growers in terms of engaging them to get their participation on a broad basis as we expand this program across the US. And that's the real impetus for trying to create the whole platform.
Okay. And I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit between programs
Sure.
because April, I want to talk to you about BCI. I think most people in the home textiles industry at this point are aware of BCI, but they might not have an idea of the full scope of the program. Can you just give a little background and talk about, the countries involved and whatnot?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm the U.S. operations manager. So my team and I here in the U.S. work to implement the Better Cotton standard system here in country. But globally, the Better Cotton Initiative is 10 years old. We're a nonprofit. We're the largest cotton sustainability program in the world. We have over 2 million farmers in 23 countries licensed as growing better cotton. So we licensed over 20% of the world's cotton as better cotton, which ensures the supply chain that our growers are growing cotton in sustainable ways. So better cotton is grown by both large farms and smallholders. Here in the US, we're large farms, which means we have farms that are 200 or more acres of land and use mechanized production methods. A smallholder usually works a small plot of land in unmechanized ways. But the uniting force of all our growers is that we work with them to meet and continuously improve upon criteria against our 7 core principles, which include decent work, crop protection, water stewardship, soil health, biodiversity, responsible land use, fiber quality, and effective management systems. So in large farm and smallholder countries, we implement the assurance program in different ways that are fit for purpose based on size, but with the same objective of assuring that our growers are attaining and improving upon rigorously developed criteria that fall under those 7 core principles. So in the US, we're ever improving the program here, and we were established 5 years ago, and right now we have about 6 to 7% of US cotton licensed as better cotton, with roughly 350 growers participating in the program this year.
Okay. And I think April and Gary, both of the programs, the ultimate aim, while it is involved reducing footprints and better environment, they're also looking to benefit the farmers that participate in these programs, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So April, I'm going to ask you first. What is the benefit to the farmers who are participating in the BCI program?
Sure. BCI ultimately exists to make global cotton production better for growers, for their families, the environment, and of course the supply chain. But while it's easy for us to say that we simply license growers, I prefer to frame it more as a partnership. We work with growers around the world to identify and adapt farming practices that allow them to maximize their yield while minimizing their effort and impact on the land. So these capacity building programs that we work to implement with our growers in turn earns them a license. BCI helps identify better farming practices for growers to implement, and that way they earn this license as they continuously improve upon their farming methods. So being in 23 countries allows for a lot of cross collaboration, idea sharing, problem solving, scalability, a lot of different innovative practices, and understanding that cotton grown in one country or even farmer neighbor to neighbor can vary wildly. We still have the underpinning of sharing and innovating practices around the world. So in a more economic sense, in addition to adopting more sustainable farming practices, our growers even with their license, they also earn the ability to sell their cotton up the supply chain as licensed better cotton. So many of our brands and retailers continue to source around the world.
Okay, and Gary, I believe there are like some tools that have become available to farmers in the U.S. Cotton Protocol, correct? For those participating?
That's correct. And I'd kind of follow on in what April said. I think a key feature of both BCI and the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol is to use producer participation as an opportunity for education. And that was a point that April made. And we try to do the same thing with growers participating in the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol. And they do have, and if you look at U.S. growers, certainly have adopted technology, highly mechanized, very advanced, have a lot of data at their disposal. Sometimes it's a matter of making sure that they are looking at that data and interpreting it in the way and hopefully identifying some areas for improvement. We do think within the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol, the tools that they're required to use as part of their participation, and one being a field print analysis tool that was created by a sustainability alliance known as Field to Market. That particular tool will provide feedback to them on some of those environmental metrics that we've been talking about, so that they can see an analysis of that field, and they can see,
of their field
that they
could,
okay. Yes, so they will pick in participating in this program, they'll pick a representative sample of their field and actually put the data, how many times they went across the field with a tractor, how many inputs they used, for example, what type of tillage methods did they use. So it's a number of variables that they put in, and those calculations are made by the field to market tool, and it's given back to the grower, and they can see their indices for their environmental impact, essentially their resource efficiency, and they can see how their results compare to other benchmarks, whether it be a state level benchmark or a national benchmark. And I think that's hopefully one of the powerful aspects of this program is to show them areas where they can continuously improve, so that they see, okay, maybe one of their metrics is not where they thought it would be. And they look at some practices that might be applicable to their farming operation, and they considered implementing those practices on their field, and that would impact their environmental footprint. So I do think there's still a tremendous opportunity for educating producers, showing them that feedback that can inform the decisions they make.
And so it sounds like you're kind of, the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol is sort of acting as almost an informational clearinghouse, like a hub.
We would like for it to be, that's right. I mean, we want at the end of the day for participating producers to view it as an opportunity that provides useful feedback to them and helps their environmental footprint. Hopefully it identifies some ways that they can improve their bottom line. I think that's going to be key, is ways to try to make it a useful tool, as opposed to them viewing it as just one more set of data that they have to provide in some platform.
Well, it does seem like the most successful sustainability initiatives are those that are helping the people or companies or entities involved lower their costs, not just lower their costs, improve their profits, and not just, doing something great for the world, right? I think that's common to both of your initiatives, right?
Absolutely. I think if we can't show them some value back to the growers year after year, it will become even increasingly, difficult to keep them interested in the program. They've got to feel like that there's some value back to them.
So Marc, I want to ask, I'm sorry, April.
No, it's fine. Okay. The interesting point to your audience is a lot of our growers question and are slower to adopt the concept of sustainability in the U.S. because they believe and truly are following a lot of these sustainability initiatives inherently in their farming practices. So we're working to really connect brands and retailers to showcase what brands and retailers and ultimately the consumer and Earth are asking for now. Like, we know you're doing better. We need to see how. We need the verification behind it.
Okay. And Marc, I know that Supima and BCI have forged a partnership as well. Can you talk about the thinking behind that and how that works?
Sure. With regards to working with BCI, I'm also currently the chair of BCI.
Oh,
And in the process of trying to figure out how to serve and work with our partners to the best capability that we have, using sustainability platforms are key and fundamental to the future of our business. And I think, equally so for all brands and retailers as they approach their products in the marketplace, their responsibility to the environment, to the globe, to their people that they work with, and ultimately the supply chain that they count on. So working with BCI, Supima started that many years ago, initially with a request from Marc and Spencer out of the UK in terms of using Supima and having Supima become BCI approved, or some aspect of BCI approved cotton. So we worked directly with our board initially to do the first BCI farm trials here in the US, and got the first participant from the growers. And we've grown from there. And this year we started acting as an implementing partner for BCI, with an objective of trying to grow that larger pool of cotton that is Supima, that is also BCI approved. Similarly, CTP. So Cotton Trust Protocol and BCI work slightly differently because the CTP is more technical model based on technology implementation on the farm level, and the BCI model uses much broader impact-based processes to look at solutions that can make a large-scale impact, even though it might be small, but because of the volume of cotton that BCI has under house, the global impact is really significant if they can make a small impact across that entire group of farm and production. So
okay.
two different models, but both striving to accomplish the same goals, for the brands and retailers.
I couldn't have said that any better, Marc.
Thank you. I hope that goes for Gary too.
Absolutely. I'm glad we're recording this so I can remember that answer.
Right. Thanks, Marc. It is true.
Well, April, can you talk about BCI and I may not be pronouncing this correctly, ISEAL?
Yeah, sure. It is ISEAL. You've got it right. BCI is a member of ISEAL, and it's always a part of conversations that BCI has around sustainability and credibility.
But could you explain ISEAL?
I can.
Okay.
It's a global association that defines key elements of a credible sustainability standard based on international best practice. So BCI works with ISEAL to ensure that our assurance program around the world is rigorous, is measurable, is scalable, and most importantly, is credible and globally recognized. So we adhere to ISEAL's credibility principles, which were developed a number of years ago with a few hundred different NGOs, different standard setting organizations, government bodies, as well as businesses, all with the goal of ensuring that sustainability standards, licenses, certifications, that we all have the same strong foundation to build upon and to be held accountable by. So a number of our BCI staff work with ISEAL regularly. I'm glad it's not me, to ensure we're in line with ISEAL and our peers. They include organizations like Fair Trade USA, Fair Trade International, the Forest Stewardship Council, Global Coffee Platform, the Rainforest Alliance, the Marine Stewardship Council. So there are tons and many members of ISEAL, and it's the kind of global platform of which standard systems are built and recognized by.
Yeah, it seems to me, there are a lot of tools being created under several initiatives around transparency, sustainability, certifications. I mean, Marc, Supima has been involved with Oratane for
3 years.
3 years now, which is, for those who haven't heard of it, it like tracks the provenance of Supima cotton from the actual plot of land where it was grown, correct?
Yep.
All the way through the supply chain.
That's correct. It's an origin verification process using forensic science to identify the trace elements that the cotton naturally picks up while it's being grown in the different regions it's grown in. So we've created a full origin platform map of where the cotton is being grown on all the different farms, and in that database, we can now test samples at any point in the supply chain and validate them against that, basically origin verification fingerprint, let's say, which makes it unique. So Supima is the first fully verifiable origin cotton, branded cotton in the marketplace. Besides being, the extra long staple and unique fiber characteristics that make Supima stand apart on its own, the ability for a brand and retailer to look and have security about the supply chain, because of the opacity in the supply chain, you can see past that now through testing or having let's say a statistically relevant model that you will test on your product or set of group of products on a percentage basis. That allows you to authenticate and validate in the supply chain that there is no mislabeling or misuse of fibers or substitution. Let's say a yarn doesn't make it to a mill in time, so a mill uses something that they may have in stock or something else.
No, tell me that never happens.
I won't say that, but in cases where there's risk of substitution because of the excessive demands on the supply chain, when people are scrambling to get something done and orders to fulfilled on time, you now have the certainty because you can actually look at the product at any point, even on the retail shelf. So from fiber to retail shelf, you can test, validate it, and be comfortable that if you're looking for 100% Supima, we can say, yeah, it is 100% Supima.
So, are any of the brands, is this really more an internal thing for the brands that are using Supima? Or are any of them doing anything customer facing or something in their marketing on their websites about this capability to go all the way to, here's Farmer Bob in California and this is his cotton?
Yeah, so it's a very good question because every brand we talk to is different, in terms of how they want to preface it. If they adopt it, what does it make the rest of their products look like? So there's always a question of, if we do this, then we're not doing it with everything else. Is that okay? You have to start somewhere. You can't go from 0 to 100 overnight. It's a process, and adopting a process like this just takes time, and you have to understand your supply chain, which means you actually have to do a deeper dive and understand who the participants are, where all the product is coming from, all the hands-on aspects throughout the entire supply chain. So it really depends on the brand. Kering Group, for example, for Gucci and Alexander McQueen, et cetera, they've been using Supima specifically to identify one organic Supima farm in New Mexico. So while we generally use Oratane for just identifying Supima as a general cotton fiber commodity, you have the ability to go down to actual individual farm origin. And Kering Group specifically, because it's organic cotton, they wanted to make sure that not only is it Supima, but it's organic Supima, that they can identify it back to that farm. So, that takes a little bit more work on the front end because you actually have to do more analysis, more sample collecting of the fiber from the farm on the front end. Once you have that more rich saturation database, then you can fine tune the forensic science to look into the analytics to differentiate that from the surrounding farms.
And April, I know there are a lot of brands and retailers that are involved with BCI cotton as well, correct?
Yep, there are. We do have about 500 brands and retailers that are members. We've got over 2,000 members throughout the entire supply chain from all the sectors, but just under 500 retailer and brand members, and they include IKEA, Williams Sonoma, Levi's, H&M, Ralph Lauren, Gap, Adidas, Abercrombie.
Yeah.
I can go on and on. PVH, Target, Nike. I don't want to leave anyone out, but it's a significant list, and a lot of them have developed sustainability goals within their own entities to source 100% sustainable fibers, for example, and a number of them have committed to sourcing 100% sustainably sourced cotton. And what that means to them is different within their portfolios, of course, but BCI is available to them as that credibly sourceable part of their cotton cotton transformation platform to focus more on sustainably sourced cottons. So we continue to see more and more interest from brands and retailers to definitely pull this through the supply chain.
And so they aren't the ones who are licensed BCI. They are sourcing from licensed BCI.
Right.
And
Yeah.
how do companies that aren't part of BCI get hooked up into BCI?
Sure. So in order to access what we call Better Cotton Claim Units, BCCUs, we work on a mass balance system. So if people want to utilize and have better cotton in their supply chain, we pull through on a mass balance system rather than a physical piece of cotton in every single fiber. Because of the scale of our program, it's just not possible right now to do physical traceability, though we do have some ideas around some fun pilots we might be able to do with Marc's group. So if brands are not currently members of the Better Cotton Initiative, they need to become members in order to gain access and source better cotton, and they can find any information that they need on our website at bettercotton.org. If my email is a part of this interaction, they can feel free to engage with me. I will forward them on to the much better educated person about membership than me, but we continue to see a lot of brands and retailers continuing to adopt more sustainable practices. And again, it varies wildly between brands and retailers what that means to them. But in sourcing cotton, we're available as a sustainable cotton source to add to their portfolio.
But there are certain requirements, correct, around the consumer-facing labeling when you're claiming that you're working with BCI. How does that work?
Definitely. I'm not the expert to speak to it, but I can briefly let you know. We have a claims framework that all of our brands and members are trained on, and we are more than happy to share information with. But as you become a member of BCI and start sourcing products that have gone through the Better Cotton supply chain, there's language around how you properly label your product as better cotton. You can't necessarily claim that you have better cotton in your product. You claim that you're supporting the Better Cotton Initiative, which is in fact pulling better cotton through the supply chain. Whether it physically ends up in a garment at the end of the day is not the point. It's the mass balance of better cotton being flowing from the 2 million farmers that have been licensed, selling it to their merchant that's a member, selling it up the supply chain as it gets absorbed into the regular cotton supply chain as well, so that people can source the cotton qualities that they need without limitation, while also sourcing and pulling through these better cotton claim units that have been created by our farmers. So it's a hard topic. It usually takes an hour or more to explain. So there's a lot of really great information on the website. I have great colleagues that are happy, willing, and able to support any questions on that in the future.
Okay, well, that's some good insight. And Gary, I know the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol I think earlier this summer sort of put out a notice inviting companies and brands to get involved in the initiative. What is the strategy there? How do people get involved?
Well, and you're right. We have started to promote that and to the brands and retailers here over the course of the end of the summer as we head into fall. So certainly, if anybody is interested, any brand retailer is interested, they can get information and reach out through our website, trustuscotton.org. We can follow up directly with them. In fact, there's a number of conversations that are happening now with various brands and retailers about membership into the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol. And we know, and April mentioned this, brands and retailers are, they're setting targets for, their sourcing objectives for some year in the future. And it will vary by brand or retailer what cottons they have on that list or what material they have on that list. So we hope there's an opportunity for the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol to be on that list. But again, trustuscotton.org will give them the contact information, and we're happy to follow up with them.
Well, I mean, you're right. I think we're seeing a number of brands and retailers. I mean, you have Walmart was out this week with another, I think they're raising the bar on some of their zero emissions. Tommy Hilfiger in the last month, I think, set some goals around waste. And, you know, you have several leading brands and retailers that are the most aggressive, right? And consciously by their very size, looking to influence the supply chain and bring everybody else along with them. I'm wondering in terms of you know, Supima's already a consumer-facing label, BCI's already a consumer-facing label. At some point, is there an idea that the U.S. Cotton Protocol will have some sort of consumer-facing messaging?
I think certainly that's a very distinct possibility as we look to the future. We do not have a firm timetable on that, but it is, you know, it's an issue that we are talking about right now.
Okay. All right. You know, we've been talking about discrete efforts and specific programs. I think we can all agree that textiles industry as a whole has made some great strides, especially I would say over the last 3 to 5 years. I think feels like things have really ramped up in terms of traceability and authenticity. But you guys are kind of up to your eyeballs in it. I'm wondering from your perspective, how far have we come as an industry? Is it really still a matter of a few leaders and everybody's catching up? You know, how far have we come and where do we have to go and what are we missing in between? Gary, you want to start off on that one?
Sure, and you're right. I think certainly the textile industry's made a lot of advances in you know, the focus on sustainability has intensified. In fact, is even going through the current pandemic. I think, you know, the focus on sustainability has not waned. We've done some surveys that have looked at, you know, the attitudes of brands and retailers, and it does. I think this only intensifies the need to have transparency in the supply chain, to be accountable in terms of the products that are used throughout the supply chain. So yes, there's a lot of progress has been made, but at the same time, a lot is still in front of us. I think particularly when we talk about traceability, Marc mentioned verification earlier. Really, I think still understanding and knowing all the components of that supply chain and being able to document it and verifying it on a broad scale still has a long way to go. A lot of work left in front of the industry to try to nail down some of those issues.
Yeah. Marc, I know the view from Supima is that very soon traceability is going to be just table stakes. You got to be able to do it. I mean, how just to get in the door and have credibility. I mean, how far along do you think we are in that process?
And I would say yes, ultimately we're going to have to get to that point, you know, just to follow on Gary's point relative to understanding your supply chain and having insight of where your product's going, where it's being manufactured is going to be really key and critical. There still seems to be a significant disconnect between, let's say, a brand sustainability group and a big brand's business group, you know, in terms of making decisions on marketing, making decisions on pricing, on the retail sales prices. There are costs that are inherently attributable to trying to do the right thing, whether, you know, it's working with Ortane to build in a system, even by using Ortane where there's no additive marker or any other technology, you still have to pay for testing. You still have to pay for the insight and the time to generate knowledge about your supply chain. You have to have the documentation. So you have to have a committed set of employees and staff and time that's, you know, associated. That's just an innate cost that has to happen. Up until COVID, everybody always pushed back on costs and said, well, everything has to come for free or for less. And what we're beginning to see now since, you know, COVID-19 has started, at Supima's side, we're getting to see a little bit more interest from the brands and retailers and saying, okay, look, you know, things are really messed up. this is a really good opportunity for us to kind of dig deeper a little bit more, because some of the programs are getting smaller. It allows us to focus more specifically on trying to understand what we're doing, how we're doing it. And they're looking to actually understand those interpretive connections of that supply chain, who's actually involved, where the cotton's coming from, who's manufacturing the yarn or the fabric, how it's being processed. So while there's a lot of great standards out there in terms of chemical usage and things, that's just a paper trail.
Mm-hmm.
Having insight, beyond like a regular audit or a blockchain, you still need that physical verification. If you don't have the physical verification, you're missing that connectivity to the actual authenticity of the product. And that's why we spent so much time, 12 years, trying to find a solution that would work ubiquitously across all Supima cotton, that we have a tool that brands and retailers could tap in, either for a small program or a big program. It gives them complete flexibility and the ability to leverage that to have an authentic statement and policy saying, look, we've done the work, we know where it's coming from, we know who's involved, we can authenticate it through the whole supply chain. So we're getting more brands that are, we've got some that are engaged already now doing specific programs, and we have some brands that are doing pilots, but they're slowly ramping up. Every week we get a new email from somebody inquiring a little bit more and saying, how do we engage this? What does it look like? What does it mean? There's still a lot of confusion in the marketplace about different technologies, microbiomes, the forensic science using trace elements and isotopes, DNA. So all this conversation, and people don't understand or confuse terminology. So even talking about sustainability, traceability, transparency, authentication, and origin verification, they all mean very different things, but people label things. And that's one of the challenges with the brands and retailers connecting to the consumers, is how do you message that, right? Because unless you're truly authentic about what you're saying, you're going to get ultimately called out, or you don't build the trust in that consumer base because it doesn't make sense what you're saying. So those are the challenges I think that we're beginning to see addressed now, which will be then the next 5 to 10 years as those saturate into the supply chain for development.
And April, Mark's kind of touching on something you referred to earlier about different brands, different retailers having different definitions around even the word sustainability. Now I know that, as you said, the BCI program operates a little differently. If you're sourcing BCI, it means you're sourcing from this group that's growing BCI. As you said, doesn't necessarily mean that this particular dress is 100% BCI fibers, but the program overall has been growing. And I think you guys put out, is it annual reports where you're tracking the expansion of the program? I mean, can you talk about the growth trajectory a little bit?
Sure. Right now, we've got over 2,000 BCI members. And again, they're, to your point, it's a constant wonder of many people and trying to understand different sustainability initiatives amongst brands and retailers. But with that in mind, we really encourage our brands and retailers to focus on defining what sustainability means to them and then building their programs around that. Granted, that's not what we're in the business of doing, but it helps support how we support them back by truly saying, we offer a standard. We offer a sustainability standard for cotton. Like, take this out. Like, this can be in your portfolio. Cotton, BCI, that's fine. We can help them define that aspect of their supply chain. But BCI overall has been around for 10 years, and we've reached 2.3 million farmers in 23 countries, and 22% of global production is licensed as BCI. And so our highest priority is the large scale transformation of cotton production worldwide, so that as many farmers as possible gain access to the knowledge and tools to improve environmental, social, economic, all the sustainability legs of cotton production. So that in turn, brands and retailers know that what we are doing can fall very easily in line with what they're looking for their cotton supply chains. This year, we had hoped to reach 5 million farmers and 30% of global production. That horrible C word that we keep floating around has impacted our year, but we certainly expect and anticipate reaching those numbers soon in the near future. But ultimately, BCI's mission is to reach 100% of global cotton, is to reach 100% sustainably grown cotton around the world. Whether or not it's BCI grown sustainably labeled cotton or some other initiative that supports sustainability initiatives, we know that we have that foundation, again, built around ISEAL, that absolutely anything that's BCI licensed definitely can fall into the sustainability platform. But there are other really great up and coming programs like the Cotton Trust Protocol that we support and we're interested in working with, that we ultimately, the end goal is that we transform the cotton industry to being focused on growing sustainably grown cotton and also supporting the people that are growing that cotton. I mean, I'm not brand and retailer facing. I'm more than happy to interact with them, and I do on a large basis, but my heart and soul lies with focusing on supporting my growers and getting them through this licensing process, and making sure that what they have done is at a high enough level to achieve that BCI license year over year. So again, we want 100% sustainably grown cotton around the world, and that can mean BCI, that can mean organics. There's a lot of different things that can be a part of this bucket moving towards sustainability.
Well, when we talk about sustainability, I think one of the things that's really starting to bubble up a lot now, at least in terms of the companies in the industry that are being aggressive about it, is the biodegradability factor. I mean, we're starting to see home textiles products that, even if it's just in their conversations with their retail accounts, talking about the biodegradability of their products. And obviously, cotton has a good biodegradability story to tell, but a lot of cotton ends up in blends. I'm just wondering if in your conversations with the stakeholders in the industry that you're all dealing with, are you hearing much about this subject?
Who wants to take that one? I'm not deeply involved in it. I'm very well aware of it. I don't know if I have an educated thought around it, though. And I assume that Marc or Gary would more so than I.
Well, I do think we hear more about biodegradability, and I think overall that can be a very positive message for U.S. cotton compared to, or for cotton in general, compared to other fibers, particularly if you think about the man-made fibers, the synthetic fibers, because there's been a good bit of research done that's looked at the biodegradability of cotton relative to some of those other fibers. And as I recall, North Carolina State University undertook some research that looked at those fibers being in water, in a water environment, that after relatively short amount of time, 35 to 40 days, you were already seeing a lot of biodegradability of the cotton fibers, yet you really weren't seeing any of the biodegradability of polyester fibers. And in fact, it would take it, years and years and years, and maybe even measured in decades in terms of some of polyester products to biodegrade. So I do think that is particularly when we then kind of bring into the whole issue of microfibers, microplastics concerns in the waters and the oceans. I do think there's a growing awareness of that particular issue, not just among brands and retailers, but also among consumers. And again, I think that's where cotton and all of our organizations here that have a strong interest in cotton really need to try to be getting that message out and providing that research and that message to the consumer about the benefits of cotton, because there's too many times we see, negative connotations, unfortunately, attached to cotton. And I believe they have a better perspective of the positives that are there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think you really touched on where it's coming from the consumer side. It's the stories about, whales washing up on beaches with tons of, literally of plastic waste in them. And that's permeated into the news. I am starting to see very recently some home textiles producers turning to some treatments for the synthetics in their blended products that are supposed to speed the decomposition. And that's just one small piece of the larger puzzle of circularity, right, that the most aggressive organizations are working on. And I'm just wondering, where you think the industry is along that cycle. I mean, Marc, do you want to talk about that?
So I'm going to change the direction a little bit of the question, because
Okay.
when you think about cotton, cotton represents 80% of the world's natural fibers, right? So it's by and far and large the largest supply of available fiber grown globally. It's massive impact in terms of countries, in terms of agriculture, in terms of employing people and providing work for communities to support agriculture. So when you talk about biodegradability or sustainability, all those aspects, you have to look at cotton as a larger picture, because if you don't do so, you're neglecting the impacts and the effectiveness of cotton to do positive things on a global scale. When we approach cotton from a perspective of looking at one specific aspect like biodegradability, that's great because it's a natural fiber, but all the processes going into growing cotton in terms of the responsibility, the farmer practices, the education processes that are out there, the ability of cotton to being carbon positive, so it sequesters more carbon than it is released in the growing process of it, so that's a positive. All of these things tie together in terms of the responsibility of using a cotton fiber, and then the fact that cotton is natural, that it has the ability to biodegrade in the appropriate environment, provides that, kind of continuity of nature. As products are, as natural products are grown and produced, they also die and transpire, and then they become part of that environment again. So, it's a great thing. There's a lot of, competitive products in the marketplace that always try to be like cotton. So they're getting these processes that are trying to make it perform like cotton. Well, we already have cotton. We've had it for 7,000 years. It works darn well. And it provides the comfort and the, the product characteristics that a lot of people generally look for.
Yeah. There was a question that came up, and I think, Marc, you answered it off in the chat room, but just in case anybody doesn't have their chat function up, the question was, how do the new restrictions on Xinjiang cotton from China impact these various programs, if at all? And Marc, you kind of shot out an answer, but you want to run us through that again?
Yeah, I can, it's a really complicated question. When you're looking at OFAC regulations and you're looking at customs, the issue with Xinjiang cotton is complicated, not only from the grower side there in terms of potential forced labor issues, but it also has financial impacts, such that if you are working with an associated organization of XPCC, which is reported to have some 860,000 affiliated companies around the world, there are immense amount of risks. So there's a lot of caution being used within the industry to look at cotton products, or just products coming out of Xinjiang, because, is it forced labor on the farm level? Is it forced labor in the factory level? And it may not only be cotton, it could be many other industries too. So it could be automotive, it could be technology industry, it could be in the synthetics market. Polyester, are they using, forced labor in the spinning or the knitting or weaving of synthetic programs too? So the the challenges with the US legislation right now are impacting the ability of brands and retailers to have security in terms of importing, because the onus of proof falls upon the brand and retailer upon import. And it can just be a subjective hold that is restricting an import, but the brand and retailer would have to prove that the product is not made with any forced labor, which becomes a real challenge. So because China is the biggest textile industry, section in any country in the world, it's going to challenge everybody in terms of even how our cotton flows. China typically is our largest importer. Well, it won't be this year. We are moving cotton into other markets, and other markets are picking up demand that is coming out of China. So all of that will change, and I don't know if anybody has a good, clear, definitive insight of what that all means in 6 months or even a year's time. I don't see this going away, and I don't see China being responsive and taking this on in a transparent way. So that their standard policy right now, it's their re-education program, and they seem to be standing behind that position.
Yeah, you're mentioning the kind of relocation of some production into other countries, and I think obviously it's apparel leading the way. And when the China tariffs came on in 2019, a lot of companies thought, well, this is finally going to spur that diversification of the sourcing portfolio that everybody's been talking about for a long time. I don't have a sense that's happening really very rapidly. And again, more for garments than for home. What do you see happening there, Marc?
I would certainly agree with your assessment that home is slower in that respect. There's obviously a lot of home products that come out of Turkey and India and Pakistan. Apparel is by far and away the largest production area for that is China, including synthetics. So those challenges are going to persist for some time. I think it's going to be complicated too, because there are Chinese companies that have foreign investments in other regions. So even if you're working with one of those Chinese companies sourcing from an outside country, there is a financial tie back to that. So if they derive financial benefit from the business that you do, you're potentially at risk. It's going to have to force movement more so, and I think more quickly, out of China, unless there is some quicker resolution, or at least clarity from the US legislative side in terms of how they're going to assess and filter those restrictions. But we still don't have enough detail on what those are and how they're going to be implemented. It's kind of a nebulous subject still.
Yeah. Well, when you're talking about sort of no textiles stuff, especially as it involves cotton, there's the Uzbekistan matter, right, where the government forces essentially population into the fields to do the harvest. And as you look at some of these global programs, I mean, is there any thought that one day Uzbekistan cleans up its act and can participate in some of these programs, or we're just not there yet?
There's always hope.
There's always hope. Okay.
I think this might be the more touchy-feely side of what's been going on this year, but when it comes to Xinjiang and microplastics and some major industry shifts are coming out of human mindsets, opening up to the fact that maybe it's not because we've all been a little bit more homebound, but it's whatever it is this year has really allowed for a lot of things to explode, unfortunately. And fortunately, we're becoming a lot more aware of human inequities around the world, and people are really angry about it. And people are becoming really angrier and more vocal and active around what's happening with the environment. So what I knew was microplastics a few years ago, I now very actively try to figure out how not to let those into my home. That's not possible, but how do I reduce it? And same goes for Xinjiang, and BCI is not licensing in Xinjiang this year. We're still doing a lot of our capacity building programs for the human level of interaction to make sure that growers are still supported. It's a very hot topic, and I don't mean hot topic, it's on the hearts and minds of everyone at BCI these days. So professionally and personally, I hope, it is my hope, my great hope that Uzbekistan, that China, that humans start to be more thoughtful, because there is a lot more awareness and a lot more people that are just angry about things and becoming mad and going through these phases of anger, rage, acceptance, like how do we grieve what this year has been, but how do we make it better? And I have great hope that personally and professionally people make changes, and we all kind of think about how do we as humans move forward more thoughtfully on this planet that is hosting us here. So I'm not going to make a big political stand on it, of course, but I have hope for Uzbekistan. I have hope for China. I have hope for a lot of other cotton growing countries. I think the three of us on this panel, I believe in cotton wholeheartedly, above and beyond many, many other things that are created on earth, and want to help support it. It's not perfect, but there's a lot of room for improvement, while also noting that there's a lot of good that comes out of this industry already, and a lot of people, and really smart people, and really cool practices happening around the world to make sure that cotton becomes and remains this really amazing product that comes out of the earth that clothes 100% of people around the world. So you can't say that for man-made fibers. You just can't.
True. And we've only got a couple of minutes left. By Gary, you touched on, I think, some research you've seen involving COVID, and the fact that rather than knocking the whole sustainability issue off to the side, which is actually what I expected to happen when this all blew up, that's actually put it more in the forefront. And I've also had some companies, we see consumers are much more interested in health and wellness products, and this seems to be linking up in their minds. And maybe, April, as you said, it's because we're now seeing blue skies and dolphins swimming in the canals of Venice, and really getting a quick visual on our impact as human beings. So if we're going to wrap it up, how does sustainability and sustainable cotton, I think, play toward consumers? As it already has a big trust factor, right? Cotton is a highly trusted fiber, but does stepping forward with the sustainability enhance that? Is that part of the goal?
Well, I'll start that. I certainly think it is. Stepping forward with sustainability is part of the goal, and I think it does help cotton. I believe we've got a positive story to tell. I go back also to just some of the issues we've observed as we've gone through the COVID pandemic, and as we have seen, changes in economic activity in various countries. I think consumers have noticed that in some areas where there have been changes in economic activity, we've seen impacts on the environment. Pollution levels, for example, that have become markedly lower than they would have been prior. So it reinforces, I guess, the notion that the inhabitants of this planet can and do have an impact on the environment, and that if we are more efficient with our resources, we can have that positive impact. And I think that's, as we look at any of these sustainability initiatives, that's a key part of it, is how can we continue to produce what we need, but do so with fewer inputs, fewer resources, and less environmental impact.
Yeah. Marc, any thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, I agree with with Gary's comments. The challenges still tend to be, the current, or let's not say current, but the past business models in terms of how businesses was decided upon, right? You go to market, and everybody runs around all the showrooms looking for product, and the ultimate question is price, and how do the margins work? That conversation has to change, and it's going to be tied in with a brand's position relative to what they're trying to present to their customer, and then that will tie in then to the authenticity of the quality of the product, you know, the inputs that are used, and then the commitment of the brand to the supply chain and the participants in that supply chain that are trying to do the right thing, whether it's BCI Cotton or it's a Cotton Trust Protocol, you know, trying to work with those groups to selectively choose them over and above other options out there because they trust and believe in what they're doing, and they want to take that message to share with the customers to demonstrate that not only are they trying to make a product that they desire visually, you know, based on what the consumer's needs of the season may be, but with a fundamental core impetus of saying, we're standing behind doing the right thing, and that is a core fundamental of our business strategy going forward. And we're beginning to see that, you know, trickle into the marketplace more, and I expect to see that grow here in the next year to 2 years, especially as we try and fight through this market challenge at the time.
All right, well, I think that's a great prediction, and let's hope that's the way we go. We've hit our time. I want to thank our panelists. Thanks Supima for their sponsorship, and thank everybody for watching. This session is being recorded, so you can come back and watch it again or share it with your colleagues. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Appreciate it.